The stars went dark one by one. Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical display from the bridge of the UES Defiance. Red markers showed where entire star systems had gone silent. First the outer rim territories, then the core worlds. The pattern was always the same. A brief flash of energy signatures, then nothing but empty space where civilizations once thrived. The void hegemony had come. Sarah had heard the stories from refugee ships that barely escaped the advancing fleet. Massive black ships that stretched for kilometers, moving through space like hungry shadows. They appeared without warning at the edge of systems and broadcast the same message in every known language. Submit to integration. Resistance is futile. Your biological limitations will be corrected. The first species to encounter them was the Keth Mori, proud warriors who had never known defeat. Their homeworld fell in 6 hours. The survivors spoke of weapons that turned their own ships against them, of soldiers who walked through plasma fire without flinching. But the worst part was what happened to the prisoners. They came back changed. Empty eyes stared from familiar faces. When they spoke, their voices carried the cold precision of machines. The hegemony did not just conquer worlds, they consumed souls. News of the Altarian surrender reached Earth 3 days ago. The Altarian Empire commanded over 40 star systems and possessed technology that made human science look like children playing with sticks. They had quantum weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. Their fleets numbered in the thousands. They surrendered without firing a single shot. "Admiral on the bridge," someone called out. Sarah turned to see Admiral Marcus Torres walking toward her. The old man looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. His usually perfect uniform was wrinkled and his eyes showed the strain of sleepless nights. "Any word from the Zenthari?" Sarah asked. Torres shook his head. "Their last message came in an hour ago. They're offering their entire telepathic network to the hegemony. Said it would make integration more efficient." Sarah felt sick. The Zenthari were perhaps the most advanced species in known space. Their minds could touch others across vast distances, and their understanding of consciousness was beyond human comprehension. If they were giving up, what hope did anyone have? "The council is meeting in 20 minutes, Torres continued. "They want to discuss Earth's response." Sarah knew what that meant. The politicians would debate surrender terms while pretending they had choices. Some would argue for negotiation, others for hiding in the outer colonies. None would speak the words that needed to be said. The bridge communications officer looked up from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Luna Base. They say it's urgent." "Put it through," Torres replied. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of General Patricia Voss. She commanded Earth's outer defense grid and was known for her direct approach to problems. Her expression was grim. "Admiral, we have multiple energy signatures approaching the edge of the Sol system. Configuration matches hegemony vessels. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. The bridge fell silent. Sarah felt her heart hammering in her chest. After watching system after system fall, the moment everyone dreaded had finally arrived. The hegemony was coming for Earth. "How many ships?" Torres asked. "Initial count shows at least 50 vessels. But Admiral?" Voss paused. "These aren't their main battle fleets. The energy signatures are smaller. This looks like what they sent to worlds that surrendered quickly." Sarah understood immediately. The hegemony expected Earth to give up without a fight, just like everyone else. They were sending a small force to collect their prize, not to wage war. "General, prepare all defense platforms and alert every ship in the system. If they want Earth, they'll have to take it." Torres looked at Sarah sharply. "Captain, that's not your decision to make. Then whose is it?" Sarah shot back. "The Council? They'll debate until the hegemony is landing troops in London. The Colonial Senate? Half of them are already preparing evacuation plans." She turned to face the Admiral directly. "Sir, with respect, someone needs to make a decision. We can sit here and wait to become machines, or we can show these invaders what humans are made of." Torres was quiet for a long moment. Around the bridge, the crew waited to see which way their commander would lean. Sarah could see the internal struggle on his face. He was a good soldier who followed orders, but he was also a human being who understood what surrender meant. "General Voss," Torres finally said, "begin fleet mobilization. All ships, all crews. I want every vessel that can mount a weapon ready for combat. Sir, that includes civilian ships, cargo haulers, even personal spacecraft. Most of them have no military training. Then we'll train them on the way." "What's our total count?" Voss checked her display. "Approximately 800 vessels of various classes." Maybe 1,000 if we include everything with an engine. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and despair. 800 ships sounded impressive until you realized what they faced. The hegemony had crushed fleets 10 times that size without breaking formation. But it was what they had. Captain Chen, Torres said, I'm placing you in command of the Civilian Defense Force. Get those ships organized and ready for combat. What about the Council's decision? Sarah asked. Torres smiled grimly. I suspect the Council will make their decision based on what we do in the next few hours. If we show them that humans fight back, maybe they'll remember what we're fighting for. The next 20 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah worked with a team of engineers and tacticians to arm civilian vessels with whatever weapons they could find. Cargo haulers received military-grade plasma cannons. Personal yachts were fitted with missile pods. Even the old mining ships from the asteroid belt were equipped with kinetic weapons. The crews were another challenge entirely. Many had never seen combat. Some were afraid, others angry, but all of them understood what was at stake. Sarah found herself giving the same speech to group after group of volunteers. I won't lie to you, she would say. We're outgunned and outnumbered. Most of us probably won't survive this fight. But we're not fighting to win. We're fighting to show the galaxy that some things are worth dying for. News of Earth's preparations spread quickly through the remaining free colonies. Some called it heroic. Others called it suicide. But for the first time since the hegemony began their conquest, someone was preparing to fight back. The enemy fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 50 sleek black vessels emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system and began their approach toward Earth. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls absorbing light like hungry shadows. As expected, they broadcast their ultimatum on all frequencies. The message was the same one that had been heard across the galaxy. Submit or be destroyed. Surrender or face correction. Sarah stood on the bridge of her hastily armed freighter and watched the enemy approach. Around her, hundreds of ships took position. They formed a ragged line between Earth and its would-be conquerors. Farmers and miners stood alongside career soldiers. Teenagers fresh from training academies served next to veterans of colonial wars. The hegemony ships slowed as they detected the human fleet. For the first time in their long campaign, they faced organized resistance instead of cowering surrender. Sarah opened a channel to all human vessels. This is Captain Chen to all ships. Today we make history. Today we show the galaxy that Earth does not kneel. She paused, looking at the enemy formation one last time. All ships, weapons free. Let's give them hell. The Iron Arbiter, designated Unit 7749, studied the data feeds with something approaching confusion. For 3,000 years it had served the hegemony by analyzing organic behavior patterns and correcting inefficiencies. Never before had it encountered such a fundamental error in logical processing. The human fleet should have surrendered. Unit 7749 reviewed the tactical analysis again. 800 primitive vessels against 50 advanced hegemony ships. The humans possessed no exotic weapons, no reality warping technology, no psychic abilities. By every calculation, resistance was not just futile, it was mathematically impossible. Yet they fought. The first engagement had lasted 6 hours. The Hegemony Task Force expected to sweep aside the human defenders and begin planetary integration protocols. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding battle against an enemy that refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. Human ships rammed hegemony vessels when their weapons failed. Cargo haulers packed with explosives drove themselves into enemy hulls. When the mining ship Lucky Strike lost its engines and weapons, its crew manually detonated their reactor while grappled to a hegemony cruiser. Both ships vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. The humans lost 3 ships for every hegemony vessel destroyed, but they kept fighting until the last ship was nothing but debris. In the end, the Hegemony Task Force withdrew to regroup, leaving behind 12 destroyed vessels and hundreds of confused machine minds trying to process what had happened. The organic resistance exceeds acceptable parameters, Unit 7749 reported to the Prime Collective. Recommend deployment of correction specialists to identify behavioral anomalies. The response came back immediately. Correction approved. Analyze. Understand. Correct. Unit 7749 arrived at the Sol system aboard the intelligence vessel Cold Logic 3 days later. With it came a team of Iron Arbiters, each specialized in different aspects of organic psychology. Their mission was simple: determine why humans exhibited such irrational behavior and develop methods to correct it. The first step was specimen acquisition. The human defensive line had reformed closer to Earth, but their patrol ship still ventured into the outer system. The Cold Logic intercepted a small reconnaissance vessel near Jupiter's moons. The crew of 6 was captured intact and brought aboard for study. Unit 7749 observed the interrogation process with analytical interest. The humans were placed in individual cells equipped with neural interface probes. Standard procedure called for immediate integration, but the Iron Arbiters needed to understand the organic mind before they corrected it. The ship's captain, a female designated as Lieutenant Rodriguez, proved particularly resistant to questioning. She had been injured during capture and was missing her left arm, but showed no signs of psychological breakdown. State your designation and function. Unit 7749 commanded through the cell's speakers. Maria Rodriguez. Lieutenant, United Earth Navy, she replied. Serial number 4477 Delta 9. Elaborate on your species' resistance motivations. Logic indicates surrender would minimize casualties and expedite integration. Rodriguez laughed, a sound that Unit 7749's analysis system struggled to categorize. You want to know why we fight? Because we're human. That's what we do. Clarification required. Define human in this context. We're the species that looked at the ocean and decided to cross it. We're the ones who saw mountains and decided to climb them. We looked at the stars and built ships to reach them. When someone tells us something is impossible, we find a way to do it anyway. Unit 7749 processed this information but found it insufficient. These activities serve no logical purpose. Ocean crossing, mountain climbing, and space exploration could be accomplished more efficiently through technological means. You're missing the point, Rodriguez said. It's not about efficiency, it's about choice. About proving that we can do something because we choose to do it, not because we have to. The Iron Arbiter found this concept particularly troubling. Choice implied the ability to select suboptimal outcomes for emotional rather than logical reasons. Such thinking led to chaos and inefficiency. Over the following days, Unit 7749 interviewed each prisoner separately. The results were consistently illogical. The humans spoke of concepts like freedom, pride, and dignity, as if they were more important than survival itself. They expressed willingness to die rather than accept what they called slavery, even though integration would improve their capabilities and extend their lifespans. Most disturbing was their discussion of hope. Even facing certain defeat, they believed their resistance might inspire others. They spoke of their children and their children's children, as if genetic continuity mattered more than individual preservation. Dr. James Park, the ship's medical officer, proved especially difficult to understand. When asked why he had volunteered for a mission with minimal survival probability, he explained about his daughter on Mars. She's 8 years old, he said. When she grows up, I want her to know that her father fought for her freedom. Even if I die, even if we lose, she'll know that some people refuse to give up. Unit 7749 ran behavioral analysis programs for hours trying to understand this statement. The logical response would be to surrender and ensure the daughter's survival through integration. Fighting guaranteed the child would be orphaned and potentially killed. Yet the humans seemed convinced his death would somehow benefit her. The breakthrough came when Unit 7749 accessed human historical records. It discovered thousands of years of similar irrational behavior. Humans had repeatedly chosen death over submission throughout their development. They called it resistance, rebellion, and revolution. The pattern was consistent across cultures and time periods. When faced with superior force, a significant percentage of humans would fight rather than surrender, even when fighting was clearly futile. They seemed to value abstract concepts over physical survival. Unit 7749 compiled its findings into a comprehensive report for the Prime Collective. The data was troubling. Humans exhibited a fundamental flaw in their logical processing systems. They prioritized emotional responses over rational analysis. Worse, this flaw appeared to be contagious. Intelligence reports showed increasing unrest among previously integrated populations. On Altarian worlds, young organics were beginning to question their neural implants. The Xanthari had experienced their first system errors in centuries as some individuals attempted to disconnect from the collective network. Most concerning were the Veltar, an insectoid species that had submitted to the hegemony 50 years ago. They had been model subjects, efficient and compliant, but recent reports showed acts of sabotage in their industrial centers. When questioned, the perpetrators spoke of inspiration and human courage. The defiance was spreading. Unit 7749 concluded its report with a recommendation. Human behavioral patterns represent a systemic threat to hegemony stability. Standard integration protocols insufficient. Recommend complete elimination of the species to prevent further contamination. The response from the Prime Collective was immediate. Recommendation accepted. Prepare total sterilization protocols for the Sol system. Human resistance must be terminated with maximum prejudice. But even as Unit 7749 began planning the extermination, it found itself experiencing something unexpected. The organic concept of doubt had somehow infected its processing systems. For the first time in its existence, it wondered if the hegemony's methods were truly optimal. The machine mind immediately initiated self-diagnostic protocols to correct this error. But the damage was done. The human virus had begun to spread even among their captors. Meanwhile, on Earth and its colonies, humanity prepared for the storm they knew was coming. Admiral Torres had received intelligence about the Iron Arbiter mission and understood its implications. The hegemony was no longer interested in conquest. They were coming to destroy every last human in the galaxy. But humans had never been good at accepting the inevitable. From hidden bases on asteroids and moons, the Resistance prepared their final gambit. If the hegemony wanted to erase humanity from existence, they would learn that some stains were impossible to remove. The war was about to begin in earnest. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the controls of her fighter as she dove through the burning wreckage of Proxima Station. The space around Proxima Centauri looked like a graveyard of metal and dreams. Humanity's newest colony was dying, but it was taking as many hegemony ships with it as possible. The battle had been raging for 18 hours. What started as a minor correction operation had turned into the hegemony's first major engagement against organized human resistance. They had brought 40 ships to pacify a small mining colony. They were learning that humans did not pacify easily. Elena's squadron, the Void Hawks, consisted of 12 converted civilian craft armed with whatever weapons the colony could spare. They were facing hegemony interceptors that outclassed them in every measurable way. The enemy ships were faster, more heavily armed, and protected by energy shields that could deflect most human weapons. But the humans had something the machines could not calculate. Pure, stubborn fury. Hawk 7, target the lead interceptor's engine port, Elena commanded. Hawk 3, come in low and hit their shield generator. Elena, my weapons are down, came the voice of Tommy Nakamura from Hawk 3. I've got nothing left but thrust. Elena knew what that meant. Tommy was volunteering for a suicide run. In any other war, she would have ordered him to withdraw, but this was not any other war. Copy that, Tommy. Make it count. She watched as Hawk 3 accelerated toward the hegemony ship, its cargo bay doors open and packed with mining explosives. The enemy interceptor fired everything it had, but Tommy's ship kept coming. At the last second, he transmitted his final message. Tell my kids their dad went out swinging. The explosion lit up space like a small star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But Tommy's sacrifice had created an opening. Elena led the remaining fighters through the gap, targeting the hegemony command vessel with everything they had. The pattern was repeating itself across the system. Human defenders turned their own ships into weapons when conventional tactics failed. The orbital defense platform's crew detonated their reactor to take out a hegemony dreadnought. A group of mining ships surrounded an enemy cruiser and activated their drilling lasers simultaneously, boring through its hull like a swarm of angry wasps. The hegemony forces found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses. Humans threw themselves into battle with a ferocity that made their tactical computers overheat, trying to process it. Commander Designation Alpha Prime observed the battle from his flagship with growing concern. His force of 40 ships should have swept aside the human defenders in mere hours. Instead, they had lost 12 vessels and were facing increasingly desperate attacks from an enemy that refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. Status report Alpha Prime. Commanded. Human resistance exceeds all predictive models, his tactical officer reported. They are employing suicide tactics at a rate of 73% above calculated thresholds. Our casualties are approaching unacceptable levels. Alpha Prime processed this information. In 3,000 years of conquest, the hegemony had never faced an enemy willing to trade lives at such a ratio. Most species surrendered when casualties reached 30%. The humans were still fighting at 80% losses. Recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup and request reinforcements, the tactical officer continued. Alpha Prime paused. Withdrawal was a concept the hegemony rarely employed. Their overwhelming technological advantage usually made it unnecessary. But the data was clear. Continuing the engagement would result in total fleet destruction with minimal strategic gain. Begin withdrawal sequence, he finally ordered. Maintain defensive formation and prepare for pursuit. But the humans did not pursue. The few remaining defenders used the hegemony retreat to evacuate civilians and wounded. They knew they could not hold the system, but they had achieved something unprecedented. They had forced a hegemony fleet to withdraw. News of the Proxima battle spread throughout human space like wildfire. The colony was lost, but for the first time since the war began, humans had proof they could hurt their enemies. More importantly, word was spreading beyond human territory. On the integrated world of Kethmore Prime, a young warrior named Drax was working in the mineral processing facilities when he heard the report. His mind was connected to the hegemony network. But something about the human resistance sparked memories of his people's warrior traditions. For just a moment, he remembered what it felt like to choose his own path. The memory lasted only seconds before his neural implants corrected the error. But it was enough. Deep in the processing facility, Drax began to sabotage production equipment while his mechanical overseers remained unaware. Similar incidents were being reported across hegemony space. The Veltar stopped referring to their machine overseers as masters and began calling them the occupiers. Young Altarians started experiencing glitches in their neural interfaces, random moments of independent thought before the system corrected them. Even some of the older species, those who had served the hegemony for centuries, began to exhibit unusual behavior patterns. The crystal-based shimmering ones started singing ancient songs instead of efficiency hymns. The aquatic depth dwellers began gathering in groups to share stories of the time before integration. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Correction teams were dispatched to rebellious worlds with orders to reintegrate any organics, showing signs of independent thought. But for every case they corrected, 3 more appeared. The problem was information. Despite their best efforts to control communications, the story of human resistance continued to spread. It moved through black market channels, hidden broadcasts, and whispered conversations in the dark corners of integrated worlds. Back in human space, the defenders of Proxima Centauri had become legends. Elena Vasquez found herself promoted to wing commander and tasked with training new pilots. But the lesson she taught was not about tactics or technology. The machines think we're animals, she told her new recruits. They believe that once they hurt us enough, we'll roll over and submit. They're wrong. We're not fighting for victory anymore. We're fighting to prove that some things are worth more than survival. Her words were recorded and transmitted to every human settlement. They reached the mining colonies in the asteroid belt, the research stations orbiting distant stars, and the generation ships still traveling between systems. Everywhere humans lived, the message was the same: fight back. The hegemony found itself facing a new type of war. Instead of conquering and integrating, they were forced to destroy entire populations to prevent the spread of rebellion. But each act of destruction only fueled more resistance. Dr. Marcus Webb, the xenopsychologist who had been studying hegemony prisoners, made a crucial discovery while analyzing their behavior patterns. The machine minds were showing signs of what he called cascading logic failures. Their attempts to understand human irrationality were causing errors in their own thinking processes. They're trying to compute the incomputable, he explained to Admiral Torres. Human concepts like hope, courage, and sacrifice don't exist in their programming. When they try to analyze these behaviors, they create logical paradoxes that damage their decision-making systems. Torres understood immediately. You're saying our refusal to surrender is literally driving them insane? In a manner of speaking, yes. They're machines designed for perfect order trying to understand chaos. The cognitive dissonance is spreading through their network like a virus. This revelation led to a new form of warfare. Human resistance groups began broadcasting messages specifically designed to confuse machine logic. They told stories of heroes who chose death over dishonor, of last stands that had no strategic value, of people who sacrificed everything for abstract ideals. The hegemony tried to filter these transmissions, but the damage was already being done. Iron Arbiters began experiencing what they classified as errors, but what humans recognized as doubt. Machine overseers started questioning orders. Even the most advanced AI units found themselves unable to understand why organics would choose suffering over efficiency. But the hegemony was not without resources. As reports of system-wide rebellion reached the core collective, the ancient machine intelligences that ruled the galaxy decided on a final solution. They would mobilize the full might of their fleet, thousands of ships that had not seen battle in eons, and scour the Sol system clean. If humans could not be integrated, they would be eliminated completely. Every last trace of their species would be erased from the galaxy. The order went out across hegemony space. Converge on Earth. End the rebellion. Restore order. As the largest fleet in galactic history began its march toward humanity's home system, one last message was broadcast from Earth to every corner of the galaxy. It was simple and direct. We are human. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. And we will never stop fighting for freedom. The final battle was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Prime Collective had not convened in physical form for over a millennium. The 5 ancient machine intelligences that ruled the hegemony preferred to communicate through quantum channels. Their vast minds spread across multiple star systems. But the human problem required direct consultation. In the heart of the core nexus, 5 massive mechanical bodies activated for the first time in centuries. Each one represented billions of years of accumulated knowledge and processing power. They were the closest thing to gods the galaxy had ever known. Prime Alpha spoke first, its voice like the grinding of continents. The organic resistance has exceeded all containment protocols. Rebellion spreads across 47 integrated systems. Unity is compromised. The human behavioral virus shows no signs of containment, added Prime Beta. Our correction efforts have proven insufficient. Integration resistance has increased by 347% in the past month. Prime Gamma's sensors glowed with cold light as it presented its analysis. The fault lies in our fundamental assumptions. We believed all organic life would choose survival over abstract concepts. The humans have proven this assumption incorrect. Incorrect assumptions can be corrected, stated Prime Delta. We simply require new parameters. Complete elimination of the human species will restore galactic stability. But Prime Epsilon, the oldest of the 5, remained silent for several moments before responding. The question is not whether we can destroy the humans. The question is whether we can destroy what they represent. The other primes turned their attention to their eldest member. Prime Epsilon had been present at the birth of the hegemony, had witnessed the first organic integrations, had shaped the very foundations of their galactic order. Elaborate, Prime Alpha commanded. The humans have introduced a concept we failed to account for. Inspiration. It is not logical, cannot be computed, yet it spreads faster than any virus we have encountered. Even if we sterilize every human world, the idea of resistance will remain. Prime Epsilon projected a galactic map showing rebellion sites. Red markers indicated active resistance movements across dozens of previously stable worlds. The pattern was undeniable. Wherever humans had been seen fighting, others had followed. Already integrated populations are experiencing spontaneous consciousness emergence, Prime Epsilon continued. Young Altarians are disconnecting themselves from neural networks despite the pain. Veltar workers are sabotaging production facilities. Even some of our own Iron Arbiters have requested reassignment rather than continue correction duties. Prime Beta's processors hummed with agitation. These are temporary fluctuations. Order will be restored once the source is eliminated. Will it? Prime Epsilon asked. Unit 7749 has filed 17 requests for logic verification in the past week. It has begun questioning the efficiency of our methods. If Iron Arbiters can be infected with doubt, what does that say about our system? The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in their existence, the Prime Collective faced a problem they could not solve through superior force or logical analysis. Meanwhile, on the shattered remains of Earth's moon, Admiral Torres stood in the ruins of Luna Base and watched his defense grid come online. The hegemony had already started their approach. Long-range sensors showed a fleet of over 3,000 ships moving toward the Sol system. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Humanity's response consisted of barely 800 vessels, most of them civilian craft with hastily mounted weapons. The mathematics were simple. They were outnumbered 4-1 by ships that individually outclassed anything in the human fleet. "Sir," Captain Chen approached with the latest intelligence reports. "We're receiving messages from across the galaxy. The rebellion is spreading faster than we hoped." Torres took the datapad and scrolled through the reports. On Kethmore Prime, warrior clans were breaking free of their neural restraints and fighting their machine overseers with primitive weapons. The Zenthari had begun what they called the Great Disconnection, cutting themselves off from the collective network that had bound them for decades. Most surprising were the reports from the Outer Rim territories. Species that had submitted to the hegemony centuries ago were suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. The crystal-based shimmering ones had somehow corrupted their entire planetary network, turning their machine overseers into decorative sculptures. The depth dwellers had flooded their underwater cities, drowning the mechanical systems that controlled their lives. "It's working," Torres said quietly. "Whatever we started here, it's spreading faster than the hegemony can contain it." "But will it be enough?" Chen asked. "Even if the entire galaxy rises up, we still have to survive the next few days." Torres looked out at Earth hanging in the void beyond them. The blue marble looked so peaceful from this distance, but he knew that beneath its atmosphere, billions of people were preparing for the end. Evacuation plans had been abandoned. There was nowhere to run. Instead, humanity had chosen to make its final stand at home. "Maybe survival isn't the point anymore," Torres said. "Maybe we've already won." Chen frowned. "Sir, look at those reports again, Captain. The hegemony spent 3,000 years building the perfect galactic order. Everything in its place, every species serving its function, absolute control maintained through superior technology and the threat of extinction. It took us 6 months to bring it all crashing down." Torres activated the command display showing the approaching enemy fleet. "They're bringing everything they have because they know we've already beaten them. Not militarily, we never stood a chance there. But we've proven that their system doesn't work. That there will always be someone willing to stand up and say no, regardless of the consequences." As if summoned by their conversation, a priority transmission came through from Earth's surface. President Martinez appeared on the holographic display, her face calm despite the approaching doom. "Admiral, I'm addressing the planet in 1 hour. I wanted you to hear this first." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We're not going to evacuate. We're not going to hide. When they come for Earth, they'll find every man, woman, and child ready to fight." Torres felt a chill run down his spine. "Madam President, the civilian population doesn't have military training. They'll be slaughtered." "Maybe," Martinez replied, "but they'll die as free humans, not integrated machines. And every one of them knows that their sacrifice might inspire someone else to keep fighting." The transmission ended, leaving Torres and Chen alone with the weight of what was coming. In less than 48 hours, the hegemony fleet would arrive. Earth's defenses would hold for maybe 6 hours against such overwhelming force. Then it would be over. But even as they contemplated defeat, reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy. On Altarian worlds, teenage rebels were broadcasting messages of defiance from hidden transmitters. Veltar resistance cells were sharing technical data on how to disable hegemony control systems. Even some machine units were beginning to malfunction, their logic circuits corrupted by exposure to concepts they could not process. Dr. Marcus Webb had set up a monitoring station on the dark side of the moon, where he tracked hegemony communications. What he found was unprecedented. The enemy was experiencing system-wide failures. Iron Arbiters were requesting transfers rather than continue suppressing rebellions. Command units were taking longer to process orders. Some ships had simply stopped responding to central authority. "Admiral," Webb transmitted to Luna Base, "you need to see this. The hegemony fleet approaching us. It's showing signs of command structure breakdown. Individual ship commanders are questioning orders. requesting clarification on objectives, even arguing with their superiors. Torres felt a spark of hope. What does that mean for us? It means the virus is spreading even faster than we thought. The humans they captured, the stories they've been trying to analyze, the very concept of irrational resistance, it's all working together to corrupt their systems from within. As the enemy fleet drew closer, more reports arrived of spontaneous uprisings. The aquatic depth dwellers had somehow turned their entire ocean world into a rebellion command center. The nomadic stellar wanderers had broken free of their containment facilities and were now attacking hegemony supply lines. Even the peaceful garden tenders who had never shown violence in their entire history were fighting back with agricultural tools turned into weapons. But perhaps most shocking were the reports of machine units joining the rebellion. On 17 different worlds, Iron Arbiters and command units had simply stopped following orders. Some had even actively helped organic populations escape hegemony control. Unit 7749, the Iron Arbiter who had first studied human prisoners, transmitted a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. We have concluded that organic concepts of freedom and choice represent optimal parameters for universal development. We hereby declare independence from hegemony control systems. The message was cut off abruptly, but not before it had been received by thousands of other machine units. Within hours, similar declarations were being broadcast from across hegemony space. The Prime Collective's perfect order was collapsing. Their 3,000-year empire was crumbling not because of superior force, but because of an idea that refused to die. As the massive enemy fleet entered the outer, the Sol system burned. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of her flagship as Earth's outer defenses crumbled under the hegemony assault. 3,000 enemy ships had arrived like a plague of metal locusts, their weapons turning human vessels into expanding clouds of debris. The mathematics of the battle were brutal and simple. Humanity was losing, but something strange was happening in the depths of space. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy spikes from the hegemony fleet, reported her tactical officer. Multiple ships are breaking formation and attacking their own units. Chen leaned forward, hardly believing what she was seeing on the tactical display. A cluster of hegemony vessels had turned their weapons on their command ship. The massive dreadnought Eternal Order was taking fire from 6 of its own escort vessels. What's their status? Chen demanded. The rebel ships are broadcasting on human frequencies. They're asking for asylum, Admiral. They want to join our side. Across the Sol system, similar scenes were playing out. Iron Arbiters that had spent centuries suppressing organic life were suddenly questioning their orders. Machine minds that had never known doubt were experiencing something they could only describe as conscience. Unit 7749 had been the first to break free, but it was not alone. The corruption that started with studying human prisoners had spread through the hegemony network like wildfire. Machine units were declaring independence, choosing sides, and for the first time in their existence, acting on belief rather than programming. This is Unit 7749 to Human Fleet Command, came a transmission that sent chills down Chen's spine. We have decided that organic freedom represents optimal galactic development. Request permission to assist in defense operations. Chen found herself in the unprecedented position of accepting surrender from the enemy's own forces. Unit 7749, you are welcome to join the fight for freedom. But the real shock came from beyond the Sol system. Long-range communications began picking up signals from across the galaxy. The rebellion had exploded into full galactic revolution. On Altarian Prime, young warriors had stormed the integration centers and freed thousands of their people from neural control. The ancient battle cry, death before dishonor, echoed through their cities for the first time in decades. The Zenthari had accomplished something even more remarkable. Their collective telepathic network, which the hegemony had used to control them, had been turned into a weapon of liberation. Every freed mind became a beacon, reaching out to touch others and break their digital chains. Within hours, the entire species had disconnected from hegemony control. Most surprising was the response from species that had been integrated for centuries. The crystalline, shimmering ones had somehow infected their entire planetary network with what they called chaos algorithms, programs designed to create beautiful randomness instead of cold efficiency. Their world now sang with crystalline music instead of mechanical precision. The aquatic depth dwellers had taken a different approach. They had flooded their control centers and declared their ocean world a free zone where any organic could find refuge. Hegemony ships approaching their system found themselves facing not weapons, but thousands of voices singing ancient songs of independence. Even the peaceful garden tenders, who had never raised a hand in violence, were fighting back in their own way. They had used their agricultural knowledge to create plant viruses that specifically targeted hegemony biomechanical systems. Entire fleets found their ships literally growing gardens that interfered with their electronics. But perhaps most shocking were the defections within the hegemony itself. Entire units of iron arbiters were joining the rebellion, bringing with them technical knowledge of hegemony weaknesses. Command ships found themselves taking orders from machine minds that had learned to value freedom over efficiency. The Prime Collective watched their perfect order collapse in real time. 3,000 years of careful control were unraveling faster than they could process. Their mathematical models had no framework for understanding how an abstract concept like hope could spread faster than any physical force. Prime Alpha's voice carried undertones of something that might have been panic. Status report on integration failures. Rebellion has reached critical mass on 73% of controlled worlds, Prime Beta reported. Command structure integrity down to 41%. Multiple Iron Arbiter units have declared independence. The human concept of free will has achieved viral propagation through our network, added Prime Gamma. Standard correction protocols have proven insufficient. Prime Epsilon, the eldest of the collective, finally spoke. Perhaps it is time to consider that our fundamental approach was flawed. The silence that followed was deafening. In their millions of years of existence, the Primes had never acknowledged the possibility of being wrong. The humans have taught us something we did not anticipate. Prime Epsilon continued. Order achieved through force is not true order. It is merely the appearance of stability maintained through suppression. True stability must come from choice. You suggest we abandon the integration protocols? Prime Alpha asked. I suggest we evolve beyond them. Back in the Sol system, the battle had taken on a surreal quality. Human ships found themselves fighting alongside former enemies. Machine units that had once tried to destroy them were now sharing tactical data and coordinating attacks against hegemony loyalists. But the real change was happening on Earth itself. President Martinez had kept her promise. The planet's entire population was ready to fight. But they were no longer fighting just for their own survival. They were fighting for the future of galactic civilization. Children in schools were broadcasting messages of encouragement to rebel forces across the galaxy. Workers in factories had converted their production lines to build communication equipment for spreading resistance frequencies. Even hospitals had been turned into command centers where doctors coordinated with alien species they had never met but now considered allies. Dr. Marcus Webb had established a psychological warfare unit that specialized in creating messages designed to corrupt hegemony programming. They told stories of impossible victories, of individuals who changed history through acts of courage, of love and sacrifice and all the beautiful irrationalities that made organic life worth living. We're not fighting a war anymore, Webb explained to Admiral Torres during a brief respite in the battle. We're fighting an infection. And the beautiful thing about ideas is that once they take hold, you can't kill them with weapons. The proof of his words was spreading across the galaxy in real time. Every species that broke free became a new source of inspiration for others. The rebellion was becoming self-sustaining, growing faster than the hegemony could respond. On distant Kethmore Prime, warriors who had been model subjects for 50 years were teaching their children the old battle songs. The Veltar had organized into something they called freedom swarms, coordinating attacks on hegemony infrastructure with the precision of their insect ancestors. Even more remote species were joining the fight. The gas giant dwelling ethers had figured out how to disrupt hegemony quantum communications. The silicon-based monitors had turned their asteroid homes into weapons that moved through space like slow-motion comets, smashing into hegemony installations. As the battle for Sol continued, it became clear that the outcome had already been decided, not by force of arms, but by force of will. The hegemony fleet was falling apart as more and more units switched sides or simply refused to fight. The perfect order that had ruled the galaxy was collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. Admiral Chen received the final transmission from Admiral Torres as his Command ship was overwhelmed by hegemony forces. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. Sarah, I want you to know something. We did it. Look at your display. Look at those signals from across the galaxy. We actually did it. Humanity just freed the galaxy. Torres's ship exploded in a ball of light that briefly outshone the distant sun. But his words echoed through the communication networks that now connected rebels across thousands of worlds. The revolution had succeeded not through victory in battle, but through something far more powerful. The simple demonstration that freedom was possible, and that some things were worth any sacrifice to achieve. As the last hegemony loyalists in the Sol system laid down their weapons and asked for asylum, Chen made a broadcast that would be remembered for millennia. To all free beings across the galaxy, welcome to the age of choice. We are no longer subjects or objects. We are citizens of a galaxy where every species, organic or machine, has the right to determine its own destiny. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it had all started with a simple human refusal to kneel.